Happy Hump Day, both of you. Whoever's watching this, I appreciate it. And I'm going to talk about something of particular interest to me today. I'm going to tie two topics together, and it'll make sense when we get there. First of all, I'm a Chat GPT subscriber, and got a concern. Something happened the other day, and I'm going to kind of talk around this a little bit. I guess I'm going to seem like I'm a little bit directionless because I haven't pre-thought what I want to say here. But I know that New York City is looking to ban AI from giving legal, medical, and engineering advice, and I actually think it's a brilliant idea. Back in January, I was putting Chat GPT, or I was putting my information into Chat GPT. And in my case, if I'd have listened to Chat GPT, I probably would have been a lot better off. Hours before I actually called an ambulance, Chat GPT was telling me to call one. Under the circumstances, it was giving me really good advice that I was ignoring. However, I understand New York City, and I don't. You know what? I'm not advocating for what New York City is up to these days. I think they're in trouble. But in this particular case, I think it makes a lot of sense. I don't know what kind of manipulation can be done to Chat GPT on the back end or however. I mean, if you just say you had a group of people just decide they wanted to play gags and put in there to Chat GPT that it was a really good idea if you're not feeling good to take an entire bottle of aspirin. You would not think that I keep saying Chat GPT. I'm speaking of AI across the board. These AI sites, you would not think that they would be able to be manipulated that way. But let me tell you what happened to me. I asked it recently. Let me pull this back up about what evidence there was to or that Buford Pusser killed his wife. If you're familiar with the Walking Tall movies or the actual Buford Pusser, the Walking Tall movies were very fictionalized, other than certain things like the alleged ambush on Pauline Pusser or that killed Pauline Pusser. I'll come back to why I say that alleged. But anyway, so the response was there is no credible evidence that Buford Pusser killed his wife, Pauline Pusser. However, over the years, rumors and speculation have circulated because some details about the shooting were unusual. So it gives me this rundown of what actually supposedly happened. Their car was ambushed by gunfire. Pauline was killed instantly. Buford was shot in the jaw and nearly died. Authorities concluded it was an attack connected to criminals he'd been fighting as sheriff. Then it gives me some examples of why the rumor started. And then it gives me what the historians and investigators generally conclude. So, if you didn't know, you're about to learn something new about all this, if it's of interest to you. I replied, your information is incorrect. Pauline Pusser was actually exhumed, and the evidence suggests Buford shot her outside of the car. ChatGPT thought for 7 seconds, and it said, you're right. My earlier answer was outdated. As of August 29th, 2025, Tennessee investigators said they found probable cause that Buford Pusser killed Pauline Pusser, and if he were still alive, to be charged. They said her 2024 exhumation and renewed investigation produced evidence he was shot outside the car and then moved inside, and that Buford's facial gunshot wound was likely self-inflicted. Okay, I could go into greater details here. Let's do touch on a couple of things. She had never received an autopsy after the ambush. Um, Pauline's wounds were not consistent with Buford's longstanding ambush story, and they were instead consistent with a close range shooting. She was shot outside the vehicle, but her body was moved into the car. If Buford were alive today, there'd be probable cause for a murder charge. So, some other things I've dug up, kind of going in two different directions here, I know, about this was that at the time, with everything going on, whoever responded to the TBI and all that, they never did an autopsy on Pauline. Buford was credible enough as a sheriff, and under the circumstances of things that had been going on, the story tracked well enough that nobody ever second guessed Buford's story. Um, and one thing that was inconsistent that people kept all these years, they had different reasons. They kept trying to urge somebody to dig into this even further, which is kind of funny because Buford's been dead for, he died on August 20th in 74. So he's been gone 52 years. The fact his daughter's gone, you almost wonder why bother at this point, other than knowing the truth. But at any rate, another thing that didn't track with Buford's story was one of the ambush cars that he claimed to have been there, turns out had been sold several months earlier, had been owned by somebody he claimed was in the ambush, but was no longer in that guy's possession during the ambush. So his story really didn't fully track from day one. But we'll get back to the AI thing now. So, had I not called ChatGPT out on this inaccuracy, it would have never given me up to date information. I guess somewhere along the way, somebody else, and probably a lot of somebody else's, because I know I'm not the only one that's interested in Buford Pusser's story. I guess at some point this did the search, but it never, since it's such an old topic, it didn't see the potential for any changes until I specifically called it out. So suppose you were using it for medical, legal, or engineering advice, and suppose some things had changed. Maybe and they call it medical practice because they don't have it perfected. Suppose you're putting in here cancer information. Hey, I've gotten this kind of cancer, and it tells you that 2 years ago, it gives you this as current information, gives you something 2 years ago that has totally changed. And so you're following advice, outdated advice. That's kind of, I would actually call that scary. So be careful. Another thing about Chat GPT, let's say that you're watching a show about how somebody used different farming chemicals and all that to build explosives. I'm a curious guy. Just out of general curiosity, I may go look that sort of thing up. And I've got enough brains not to do that online, because these kind of things, this information is accessible outside of your purview. Just so you know, so if you go in there and you start asking a bunch of weird questions, you may stir up some interest that you don't want to have. And anyway, sorry about the distraction there. Just be careful with Chat GPT. That's the big thing. And if you're interested in hearing me wrap up about Buford Pusser, I've watched all three of the original Walking Talls with Joe Don Baker and Bo Svensson since learning that Buford very likely killed Pauline. And my attitude towards the movies has not changed, and I'll tell you why. I've watched those countless times, and for a good 20 or 25 years, maybe, I've known they were highly fictionalized accounts. if Buford Pusser materialized and walked up to me, I would know him from pictures. I wouldn't know anything about his mannerisms, his attitude, his demeanor, or anything. I wouldn't know what kind of person he was. Uh, I've heard a few audio clips of his voice. I might recognize that. But the point is, I've identified Buford Pusser in my mind as this fictionalized character. And over the years, I kind of got where I preferred Bo Svensson's portrayal of him a little better, even though Pauline liked Joe Don Baker better, and they actually stayed in touch until Pauline died. I talked to Pauline Pusser personally a time or two. But anyway, so in my mind, Bo Svensson is Buford Pusser. And the fictional stories in the movies are what I like about that fictional character. And the fact that the real character is very likely a far throw from what the movies portrayed. I think things were a lot grittier in real life. I also heard, I'm not saying this as gospel because I wouldn't possibly know, but also heard that Buford drank a lot of the moonshine he confiscated. So the image in the movies and the reality appear to be very far apart. But I liked the movie. I identify with the movie. So I don't know the real guy. I've got no connection with the real guy. So my opinion of the Buford Pusser that I definitely don't idolize the guy, but the ones that the Buford Pusser that I like so much, he's still as fictitious as he ever was. So my image overall is not tarnished of that. Anyway, lot of rambling there. Sorry for that. Hope you have a good day. Hope you got something out of this. Beware of AI. That's all I can tell you. I'll come up with some other nonsense to talk about soon. Until then, you take care.